Okay, people think that APS administrators are far and away separate from the everyday stories that go on in the field, but at one point in time I had my very own APS client. He was an immigrant, refugee from Hungary back in the 50s. He came over with his mother to escape political persecution. He'd been an architect in Hungary, so he was an educated man. But he and his mother lived pretty simple and fairly poor life here. One day he came home from a trip to the post office and looked in through the apartment window and saw his mother on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood. Apparently she had had a heart attack and fallen on the knife, and it was not an immediate death, so there was a lot of blood and he was quite traumatized. Law enforcement had him taken away on an emergency order of detention to a mental health facility, where he stayed several days. He was not allowed to go out to go to his mother's funeral, so he had some denial issues about whether she was really dead, whether someone had just taken her away. I met him in the early 90s. When he started coming by my office, he discovered aging services and adult protective services, decided he was an adult in need of protection. He was homeless by choice. He would come by to talk about maybe going back to Hungary someday, to talk about the homeless shelters he stayed in and the problems with them, to talk about his medical needs. We kind of adopted him as our personal client. Right after the Oklahoma City bombing, I hadn't heard from him in a couple of years, and I called down to some homeless shelters and found out that the place where he was staying was indeed allowing him to stay inside during the day, which was contrary to their policies, because he was just so traumatized. He died a few years after that, and apparently he had almost $1 million in the bank, and lo and behold, relatives from Hungary did show up to claim that. But never think that administrators are that far away from everyday life on the streets for APS. Anybody can have an APS client. I got frustrated with him one day when I was busy and said, "Mr. L, what can I do for you? I can't do anything for you." And he said in his inimitable way, "You can listen while I talk."